everybody, it's Stephen Dempsey. So sorry for my absence in the last few months. I moved to Europe, as I mentioned in my previous tutorial, and I just got done recently finishing an 800-kilometer walk across northern Spain called the Camino de Santiago. So I'm also traveling in a small motorhome around Europe, and it is next to impossible to find a quiet place to do these things, not to mention the space I need to just kind of spread out and do it. So with all that being said, I'm going to jump right into the what's new in 2019.5, and I know this is coming a little bit late for a lot of people. I just haven't had a chance to do it, so I wanted to do it anyway. And I've had a chance to play around with, the new features, so it'll be a little easier for me to talk about them. There's a couple of things as far as my workflow is concerned, and it may be something that's important to you. Sometimes little changes in these iterations of the software can be more productive, or at least have more production benefits than some of the larger changes. And one of the things that I've kind of missed or been wanting for quite a long time is the ability to look through a whole bunch of photographs and know which ones I've worked on. There is a way of doing it where, if you can see these examples here, you can see this little icon on the bottom right. That's the way that you can actually tell which you've worked on, and then the ones that you haven't touched will not have that icon. Well, I'm not the kind of person who, dumps a whole bunch of photographs in and starts rating them and color coding them and doing all this keyword business and all that. I mean, I do that sometimes, but for the most part, when I'm looking at photographs from a day's shoot, I just kind of start jumping in and start working on the ones that I like immediately. And for the most part, I forget to actually rate them. And so when I go back, I'm looking at hundreds of photographs and I don't know which ones I worked on. I do not want to go through all those little icons. So, having said all that, there is a new little thing here in the filter section. So if I turn filters on, in fact, let's go to a folder that has a lot of photographs so that I can kind of more adequately demonstrate this. So if I go to Plainview, is a place that I've spent a lot of time with recently, and there's a lot of photographs in here, and really just scooting through all these things, I could not tell you what I've worked on, and I would really have to study. There's a little icon there's a few here, but really I just want to look at the ones I've worked on, which will basically be my favorites or the best ones. So what you do is go down to filters here, click on search through catalog. Well, let's not do that. Let's just go to everything here and scoot down to a new item called settings. And when you click on that, you have some options. And so I'm going to choose develop because any photograph that I touch, the very first thing I do is develop. I don't always add effects, so sometimes that's something I don't get into, that particular module. But I always do some kind of basic develop changes. So if I choose develop, it's going to show me the photographs that have been worked on in the develop module, which essentially means the ones I've worked on, period. So if I click on that, all of a sudden, those hundreds of photographs I just showed you right there, it shows me that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or eight photographs that I've worked on, and immediately I can filter those and know what they are. So that's a huge production thing for me. So I don't know whether that's something that's important to you, but it's just a small change that was kind of buried in there. I didn't even really see much about it on the site. So that is something that I love right off the bat. So let's go back to the tutorial folder I have here, and I am going to open up this image right here and take it into edit. Okay, now the other thing that I really like is there's a history panel now, and it's right up here. So before we had the nav levels and info, but now there's a history panel. And so basically what this is going to do is it's going to record every single change that you make to your image, whether it's in develop, effects, portrait, local, whatever it is, whatever you do to it, it will be recorded in this list of in the history list. So let me just show you what I'm talking about. So let's just say that I change the camera profile here to landscape and bring down the contrast a little bit. Let's say bring the highlights down a bit and bring the shadows up. Okay. Bring them down like that. Now, if I look up here, I can see everything that I did, even though I originally put too much shadow and then I kind of took that down a bit. It records those changes that I made. So at any point, I can go back if I didn't like what I did with the shadows, or if I decide, okay, the shadows actually look good, I can go back up here. Now this is great if you're doing a lot of work and you can kind of look at what you've done. And the thing that's kind of I haven't seen in other programs is it actually shows you what those settings are that you changed. Like not only does it tell you the contrast that you changed, but it shows you that you put in -15. So that kind of gives you a good idea as to what kind of a change you made. So this is great, again, if you're just going to be working on a single session with a photograph. Now let me tell you what the problem with this is, and it may be something that happens in Photoshop too. I'm not sure. I don't think so. But if we go here so that I can go to another image. So let's just say that I wanted to reference another image while I'm working on this. So I pull up this other image here. And so I'm looking at this. And I can see in the history panel that I've done nothing but open the image, so I haven't done any work on it at all here. So I think, okay, that's fine. Now I'll go back to where I was just checking something on that photograph. Now I'm going to go back to the one I was working on. Okay, so now the history panel is blank. Why did that happen? Well, the history is only going to be remembered if you stay inside that image. So you can't do anything outside of that image if you want to keep that history intact. It is not remembered, and the minute you go to another image, it's basically wiped clean. If you wanted to make a version of this particular thing, let's say that you were happy with where you were at a certain point, you wanted to make a version, the history information will not transfer over to that version. And if you happen to go over to that version to look at it for a second and then go back to the original, again, it's going to wipe out that history. So really, if history if those history steps are important to you while you're working on a photograph, remember not to click off the photograph or you'll lose all of that stuff. Maybe it's something that will be developed over time. It would be really nice not to have that restriction, but that is a big caveat as far as the history is concerned. So there's some new features in the text tool as well, and I'll show you what is happening here. So if I click on that on the text tool, it immediately creates this little text box that has just the word text in there. You can't resize it without clicking off it and then clicking on it again so that you've got these bounding boxes, or this bounding box, and I can kind of change the size that I want that box to be. So I'm going to change the text, the font, and we'll just change it to that for now, and I'll go to a different size, say 200 points. Now let's say, by the way, you wanted to do 400 points. If you type in 400 and click off it, nothing happens. So what you want to do here is, if you want to make it something that is not a predefined number, you need to type 400 and then hit enter. If you don't hit enter, it's not remembered. So that's just something to be aware of. So, all right, so we have our text box here, and let's say I want the text to be centered inside it. We'll just click on this center orientation here, the alignment. And so we can change, just like before, we can change the color of the text. So if I go to this color square here, I can choose whatever color I want. Let's just choose this yellow. Okay. Now, you can also change the background color of the box, which is something new. And you can do that by going into this large A and small a and click on color fill. And you can choose any color you want. Now, I think by default it's set to 50% transparency, which you can see here. And so you can make that fully opaque, or you can reduce the transparency to whatever you want exactly. So the other thing that's changed is the line spacing and the character spacing. And line spacing, I can't show you that without having 2 lines of text, but the character spacing is just going to increase or decrease the size. Let's make sure that that text is selected. So it's going to increase or decrease the space between the letters. So let's just make this box a little bit bigger. And I'll just type in my text. Okay, and I'll make this box even bigger. Okay, so make sure that the text is selected, and then go to line spacing. If I increase the amount, it's going to actually, well, where did it go? Well, it actually pushed it down to beyond the size of the box, so you can see it here. Alright, so then if that's too much, I can just bring the line spacing back a little bit. And you can make it whatever you want. So it just gives more capability to the text tool, and these are basic things that have been in Photoshop for a long time, so they're definitely welcome. The other thing that you can do, in case you didn't know this, is you can add, I don't know, I think it's infinite in terms of how many different text boxes you can add, but because this text layer doesn't actually occupy the layers panel, it's not shown up there, it's kind of a free floating layer inside the actual photograph. You have to kind of work within this panel here. So if you want to add another text box, you can hit add, and just call this Blanc. Alright, which is what this area is here. And I'm going to make sure we can see all that. Whoops. Make sure we can see all that. Let's change the color of the font just back to white, I guess, just so we can see the difference here. And let's just change the background color of the box to something different. Just say this. All right. So you can also change the order of these. Right now, because this Mont Blanc one was added last, it is the topmost layer. Now, if you want to send that behind, you can just actually right-click on it and move backward. And now you can see that the first My Text is now in front. And this one that I created that was on top is now behind. So you can keep adding text layers, and you can order them whatever way you want to. You don't have the nice kind of layout of seeing all those layers in front of you, being able to just pretty much drag and drop the order. You actually have to right click on each one and move it backwards as many times as you need to get it in the exact position you want. Again, having text at all and having these new features is really welcome. So it's limited, but it will get the job done for a lot of different things. Alright, so back in Browse here, and I wanted to show you another couple of things that are new. So on this photograph, we talked before about this little icon indicating that there has been some non-destructive settings applied here. And on this one, there has not been anything. The photograph is untouched. So there's something where before you could do, you could sync the settings. So it's basically, you copy the developed settings and the effects and whatever you've done to that, and you could basically copy it from that one photograph and paste it to another, you had very limited control over what you were actually pasting. It was usually everything. So now there is something called selective syncing, which means that you have the choice when you copy the settings from one photograph, you have a choice of what of those settings you want to apply to another photograph. So that works by basically just right-clicking and copying settings, and then going to another photograph and then pasting settings. And this brings up this dialog box, which allows me to choose what I wanted to paste. So I've done a crop and level on this photograph, and I do not want to apply it to this because it's a completely different photograph. If I drill down to develop, I can see that I have changed the camera profile, and let's see what else I've put on here. If I go to color, I don't know whether I've actually put in anything specific, but that we can look at. But anyway, if I decided I did not want the tone to be pasted, and let's just go down here and just decide that we didn't want to do anything aside from just the camera profile. So you can close out all of this stuff. Right here. Okay. So the only thing that I want to post it or to paste at this point is just the camera profile. So I can apply that. There is one great time saver where this can really help. And if I go back into this mode again and click on these, just copy these settings again. Now let's just say that in this photograph and in this series of photographs, I noticed that there was some lens dust or some sensor dust on my photographs. And sensor dust is going to look the same in all these photographs. It's going to be in exactly the same place. So you can spend, 10 minutes basically retouching all of these little specks out, and then you get to another photograph, and normally you'd be doing the same all over again. Now this time what you can do is one of the settings that you can copying the settings, and then let's say that I'm applying this. If I'm pasting the settings, one of the things I can do is retouching. Now it's grayed out here because I haven't actually done any retouching on this particular photograph that I'm pasting from. But if I had done all of that work on retouching those dust spots, I'd be able to enable that, and maybe that's the only thing I wanted to paste in a whole series of photographs, and it would basically paste in that information and get rid of all those dust spots on all those photographs. So that's a great time saver, and I think that this is something that I would totally use. So that is basically the selective sync. There's a lot of different things you can look at in terms of what actual settings can be applied, so it's very useful. Another thing that is new to 2019.5 is nested keywords, and you can see that I've kind of started a keyword list over here. When you've got nested keywords, it's basically like subcategories of a category. So let me explain what I mean. So in this case, we've got a keyword called France, and inside it I have Paris and Pyrenees, and I can drop in other, let's say Plainview, that's a place, well, Saint-Julien, that's in France. I can just drag and drop that inside the France category, and once that kind of box lights up, then you can just drop it right in there. Okay, now we have France as being the parent, and then the children are Paris, Pyrenees, and Saint-Julien. Now you can't click on France and have everything be selected. It's just going to select France, and you would still have to click on these individually to enable them. And so what it does is that basically when you close it up, it really keeps things organized. So you could have France, Spain, if you're traveling around a lot of different countries, and then when you open that up, you have those keywords that are related to that country. So it's very useful. Honestly, I haven't done much with keywords because I have everything organized pretty well in terms of date and all of those things. But there are certain things that I put keywords in, and particularly with all my travels in Europe, I would find this particularly interesting. Alright, so the last thing I wanted to talk about, and it's a little bit clunky to me, but I'm just going to show you anyway, is so let's say that you wanted to put a collage together of different photographs, or you wanted to create a poster that had text on it and say a number of different photographs, or whatever way you want to do it. You can now create basically a blank canvas, which is essentially a low layer in the layers hierarchy that will allow you to use it as kind of an artboard, or have it as the size of your poster, say, and then you can start dropping things and layering things on top of it and create what could be a poster or a collage. So let me just demonstrate what that looks like. So if you go to File and you go to New Canvas, let's just call this Poster. And let's say the poster is 13 by 19, just like it is here, and it's 300 pixels per inch. That's all fine. So we'll say OK, and that will basically create this kind of artboard, the size of the poster that you're creating. So what it does is it kind of creates an invisible layer. There's not anything you can really do with this. If you look here, you don't see it in the layers because you're not going to be reordering this. This is just basically a guide for you to add your artwork to. So you can start adding layers. So let's add a photograph here. Okay, so in order to make that, I want to make that smaller, so I would go to the transform tool up here and hold down the shift key to constrain the ratio, and then you've got your first photograph. And then you can add another photograph by just hitting another at the plus icon, and let's say we want to add this one in here. And then again, I want to go to, well, transform's already selected, and hold down the shift key, and then I want to make that a little bit smaller so that fits in there as well. So now you've got two photographs, and you can add more and more layers to build up your poster look or your collage. You can also add text, and that's just remembering my previous font selection and line spacing and all that kind of stuff. So you can build it up that way. And again, the text, I'm not really sure how the text would work in this case, because like I said to you, it's not really a layer. It's kind of a free floating layer in the inside the photograph, or in this case the canvas, and you can see that you cannot change the order of this. So that has a limitation right there. So let me just close or make this box smaller for a second. Now let me show you a couple of things that I do not like about this, and it seems to be either buggy or not thought through, or will be developed at some point. When I click on this photograph, and let's say I wanted to change this to 3000. I knew the width, but I wasn't sure of the height. Well, there isn't a way of constraining the width and the height so that when you adjust one, the other one automatically adjusts. If I do 3000 for this, then it will change the aspect ratio, and that is not what I want. So it's not allowing you to constrain when you're resizing. The other thing is, if I click on this other layer here, and I want to make it say 50% in the scale, if I hit 50 and then hit enter, nothing has happened. It has not changed. And if I hit 25 and tab out of that, there is just nothing. So I don't even have an apply button. So I do not know what's going on with that. This to me is way too clunky at the moment. I just would not be able to work with it. But that's the general theory, that it's setting up this blank canvas for you, and you can put layers of photographs and text and all that stuff and create a poster. But frankly, I'm just going to be completely honest. At the moment, to me, I don't think it's ready for prime time. So the 2019 0.5 is it's really just minor upgrades, but really the things that are important to me are the ability to be able to filter the images that I've worked on, like I said before. Having the extra ability to line space and letter space the text is definitely something that is useful, and also even having that box that you can, the bounding box, and being able to make that a color and manipulate the transparency. Those are really useful things. The keywords to me, probably it's not going to be real beneficial just because I'm not much of a keyword kind of guy. And the history panel, like I said, is the fact that it just disappears when you click off the photograph. I can see, even when you're aware that, you might do that subconsciously, and that would really kind of, be frustrating. The selective sync is definitely, again, it's these kinds of things where you'll get situations where you wish you could do it and now you can. So it's going to be beneficial on a limited basis. So I really like that. The speed of the software, it seems to be a little bit quicker, and the stability definitely is better. And let me just tell you something really quick that happened to me recently. I'm on a Windows 10 machine, and I had to reformat one of my drives, and so I dumped a whole bunch of information, or a whole bunch of files, onto my desktop, and it basically just about filled up my internal hard drive. And I forgot about it. I meant to delete the folder once I had my hard drive formatted and all that information back on there. So all of a sudden, ON1 went completely crazy. It would not process HDR photographs. It was crashing constantly, and I didn't know what was going on. And it turns out that it was definitely using my C drive as a scratch disk, meaning that when it was running out of actual RAM, it was using space on my hard drive to process intensive things like HDR. I suspect that might have been the case finally after going through all this troubleshooting, and I deleted that file and freed up 500 gigs on my C drive, and all of a sudden everything worked again with ON1. So if the point of this is, if you were running out of space on your C drive in general, not even with just ON1, with any processor intensive program, you're probably going to start running into problems, and it's probably not going to be the program itself. It's going to be the fact that it doesn't have the ability to access extra space on that C drive. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, I feel like I've been rambling a lot in this one. I hope that this was helpful. I know that a lot of this has been covered elsewhere on YouTube, but I feel like I just needed to get this done. I will try to get some other tutorials finished relatively soon. It's definitely challenging. I wish I could put this stuff out faster, and I really appreciate everyone bearing with me. Anyway, if you like this video, please feel free to hit the like button. If you like what I'm doing in general and you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. And until next time, thanks for watching.